now welcome Mr. Anthony Amos from Friends of the Earth, Ms. Tracey Anton from Community Over Mining, and Ms. Lucas Cooke from Field and Game Australia. And Gary Howard from Field and Game Australia. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you all. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today? And I might start with Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Senator. Gary Howard. Take the voluntary management role of the Harp Morass Rehabilitation Project. The Harp Morass is currently owned by the Wetlands Environmental Trust, and I undertake the management of this 3,400 acre property.
Thank you.
Lucas Cooke. I'm the CEO of Field and Game Australia, and by virtue of that role, a member of the governors of the Wetland Environmental Task Force Trust that owns and operates the Harp Morass.
Thank you.
Tracey Anton. I have a blog website called Community Over Mining, and I manage it on PFAS.
Thank you.
Anthony Amos, Friends of the Earth Australia. Title be Land Use Researcher.
Thank you. I now invite you all to make a short opening statement, and at the conclusion of any remarks, I will invite members of the committee to ask questions. So we might start with Mr. Amos.
No worries, thanks. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people and the Kulin Nation on whose land we're meeting today. My submission, I've just got some additional points to the submission I sent in December. So I've done a flurry of FOIs and GIPA requests and whatever throughout Australia. So in the last few months, some updates. I got some information from North East Water. They look after the water, drinking water in North East of Victoria. There was an excessively high level of PFAS chemicals detected at Mulwala, which is on Dungala, which is the Murray River. This was in July 2023. So the levels of PFAS detected in that day were 72 times higher than the proposed Australian Drinking Water Guideline. Now, as far as I know, no one in Yarrawonga who drink the water there were really informed about that incident. Other hotspots up in the northeast of Victoria would be the military base at Bandiana, Wangaratta Wastewater Treatment Plant, Bendigo Wastewater Treatment Plant, and another small community in the north of Victoria also recorded PFAS, a place called Karangva, which recorded levels of about 4 nanograms a litre in testing from Colaban water. I also got a heap of information from Sydney Water and Water New South Wales into PFAS detections up in Sydney. And what was interesting there was there appears to be spikes of a PFAS chemical called PFBA. So it's been detected in most of the reservoirs in the Sydney area, including Prospect Reservoir and Warragamba that service millions of people. And if you go into the data at how much of this PFAS chemical has been detected in the Sydney area, the highest levels are PFBA, and we haven't even got a proposed drinking water guideline for PFBA. Now, what I worked out was that the high spikes of PFBA appear to be occurring with high levels of rainfall. So one can only concur that this stuff's coming down from the clouds and in rainfall and mist and the like. It's also interesting that PFBA was detected mainly in the Sydney area, but Water New South Wales didn't find PFBA that often or at all in the areas that they tested throughout New South Wales. In March, I also did a GIPA request with Hunter Water, so they provide drinking water to 170,000 people in the Newcastle region. The PFAS in drinking water in the Newcastle area appears to have dropped off quite considerably since about 2016, but what was going on before 2016, I don't think no one really knows. The Grahamstown Dam, which provides Newcastle with drinking water, has been, they've got a canal that feeds into that dam that's had excessively high levels of PFAS chemicals in it for a long, long time. The Tomago sand beds, which is one source of drinking water for that region, highly contaminated with PFAS at multiple locations, not just Williamtown Air Base either. I also did an FOI with Gippsland Water, so I was interested in what was happening down there in terms of contamination at Dunstan Downs, which is a major wastewater facility. It's sort of southeast of Sale, and that FOI was interesting because it shows that the aquifers around Lake Coleman and Dunstan Downs have been contaminated with PFAS. We've also got down there the ExxonMobil gas plant. They were subject to a clean-up notice from the EPA in 2017, and that's been highly contaminated with PFAS chemicals, including a contamination of the Boysdale aquifer, which is Sale's drinking water. And Sale recorded quite a high level of PFAS on one occasion. I've got the list here, but I'll have to go back to that.
If you could put that on notice, please,
Yeah.
Mr. Amos, and we'll have to. We've got a few more opening statements. So.
I'll just do two
Thank you.
Two more quick ones. The last one I did was FOI was Ayr, a small community in northern Queensland. So they've been drinking PFAS in their drinking water since 2018. So that's probably 20 or 30 years that they've been drinking it. The source is the local fire station, and they've just got a new water treatment plant which will ameliorate that. And I've sent FOIs across the country. The only knockback I've had is the Water Corporation in Western Australia. That they've refused to release information because they say it's against the public interest, if you can believe that one, you know. So every other water authority, yes, I've managed to get information. Water Corporation, no, and I don't know why.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anton.
Okay. I'm Tracey Anton. I'm a community and agricultural advocate living on Gunai-Kerno land in Latrobe Valley and have campaigned for years on planning and water reform. I'm not a PFAS impacted farmer, but I advocate on behalf of landowners as they mostly wear the legal liability burden. For health, we all wear that health risk from past, present and hopefully to a lesser extent ongoing PFAS mismanagement. It is from these two issues that I give perspective based on investigative research to expose how mismanagement has been enabled since 2017, noting significant knowledge gaps that are still evident today. I would also note Victoria's 2015 Fistbill inquiry that appears not to have influenced any state policy over the last 10 years. The community want results, but find regulators and senior bureaucrats stifle effective management, working against improved outcome. What we currently have are hidden faces colluding across all levels of government, agencies and so-called independent entities that appear answerable to no one. There exists no leadership, accountability and definitely no transparency. It's time to put a face to these people, and why my submission focused on the FRSANS board, which is Food Standards Australia New Zealand. Also, time to expose EPA Victoria and all health departments, state and federal, as they continue pretending to care for human health, all the while doing little to reduce our PFAS exposures. Time to call out irresponsible and potentially unlawful health messaging from End Health hiding behind facades. This includes WorkSafe Victoria and Safe Work Australia ignoring obligations under their relevant acts to protect worker safety. An example to reference is about the WorkSafe is the PFAS contamination of workers and others, which are neighbours under the Act, at the Longford gas plant in Gippsland regarding blood testing. This highlighted the blurred line between what WorkSafe can compel an employer to do as opposed to what WorkSafe will do, potentially politically influenced. It's time to stop at the point source too, introduce PFAS labelling and provide much needed financial assistance to responsible water corporations to better treat drinking and water, recycled water. There now exists a sense of urgency and scrutiny, especially noting the Commonwealth's December 2024 response to the recommendations from the independent review of land use on PFAS investigation around defence Commonwealth sites. Now, this fact is really important. This continues the discrimination of neighbours contaminated by industry under state jurisdiction compared to neighbours on Commonwealth contaminated land. Give a picture of defence in sale, land use, work around that with the state authorities, how best to do land use. Now go to SO, state-based industry, work out what to do with the land use. Nothing. There's a huge discrepancy in knowledge there. So we need to have an open discussion how that we have to have so many more on board. We need vets, we need the health department, we need to, or there just has to be so much more inclusive, including informed public people. Most overdue is the total maladministration of livestock raised on contaminated land and foodstuff produced for human consumption. Evidence lies in conflicts of interest from Defence Audit and Risk Committee through to Safe Meat Australia, state EPAs making their own decisions to suit on the day. Still no PFAS levels for irrigating of crops and stock watering. You'll notice that I did prepare some information. So buying property and due diligence. I've managed this in the past, we've had lots of media. That's still an unresolved issue. Now that recommendations under the Defence report talks about they're going to have to look at labels. Well, EPA were going to put that in the new Act. This is what they were going to do. This is where it was going to happen. Then they decided not to do it. So there's a huge amount of work that we have to make our state planning and environmental ministers accountable for. And then there's the label. Well, we all know a label. We all know about that. So when you look at EPA and all they have for us to reduce our exposures, state EPA, wash your hands after handling soil, noting nothing about contaminated dust, check the ingredients in personal care products even though they are not listed, avoid products containing PFAS, then we'll provide a list of the thousands of consumer products so the community can be informed. And as for advice, there are no updates, poor signage and no education. If Australia is not measuring PFAS with best practice protocols, then the public is being cheated. Australia cannot keep saying PFAS presents a low risk for our public health if we don't collate our health data in hotspot areas for research to model and better understand human risk profiles and exposure pathways. We cannot assess risk if we don't know what that risk is. This is particularly relevant given Australia assesses cancer differently from the rest of the world, go figure, which could explain our high cancer rates in Australia, and particularly Gippsland. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Anton. Mr Cooke.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today to the Chair and the committee. My name's Lucas Cooke. I'm the CEO of Field and Game Australia, and I'm appearing today alongside Gary Howard, OAM, the Chief Caretaker of our property, and we're speaking on behalf of that property, the Harp Morass. We both represent the Wetland Environmental Task Force, which is a registered environmental charity and a long-standing conservation organisation Together, FGA and WET represent a model that is rare in Australia, but it is being proven worldwide. It's conservation driven not by protest but by participation and by people who are actively in the landscape, managing wetlands, controlling predators, controlling pest, wildlife and vegetation, monitoring habitat and restoring what was lost. We also acknowledge that a country like the Harpe Morass lies on country that has been cared for over thousands of years by our First Nations people, and we recognise the cultural knowledge and spiritual connection to the country is enduring. We respect that. In many ways, our model is built around a similar principle. It's meaningful care coming from those who spend time in the landscape, who listen to the land, who return to it season after season, who observe, restore and protect. We believe access to country matters, whether for cultural practice, conservation, research, education or consumptive harvest. Access builds understanding, it fosters responsibility, and it's what our members feel when they enter our wetland and others. Not ownership but duty, not extraction but connection. We're not perfect, we show up, we work with local community members, with First Nation, with Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups, anybody who cares about outcomes. We plant trees, we monitor birds, we guide respectful access to our country. The feel of the place, the sound of the birds returning, the pulse of the wetland, these are all things you only understand once you've stood in the mud and seen it with your own eyes. That's what our entire model and organisation is based on. FGA is a national organisation with over 16,000 members that are committed to wetland conservation. Our members work directly in those wetlands, rolling up their sleeves, giving their time, donating their time and their money. And the Harpe Morass was our shining jewel, our example of how that model works and what we can do when we are involved. FGA, essentially, to give you a little bit of background of the organisation, came into existence actually back in the 1950s when the government was allowing agriculture to drain temporary shallow wetlands in Victoria, especially at an alarming rate. That actually caused members of the hunting and fishing community, farming communities and those to get concerned, and they actually formed Field and Game as a conservation organisation to try and combat that habitat loss. Originally that was by providing money to government to purchase land and conserve it in state game reserves and other public land trusts. Back in 2006 there was a significant amount of frustration from our organisation in the way government was managing those public lands, or rather not managing those public lands. And we were seeing those high value lands that were identified degrading through lack of care. So our organisation actually took the extreme step of deciding we were going to purchase a piece of land and really do it as this is how this should be done. We purchased the Harpe Morass in 2006. The members personally donated and fundraised. We didn't get a government grants or support to buy that land. It was charitable fundraising to purchase it. Over $2.1 million at a cost of over 2.4 in total to the organisation. We began the purchase of the Harpe Morass, which was actually purchased in several stages. It was then shown as a heavily degraded 1,354 hectare former grazing property downstream of RAF East Sale. We knew it was degraded, we didn't know to the extent, and we obviously at that point in time nobody really knew of the PFAS risk that was looming. We thought we were facing salinity and acid sulphate issues, not a man-made chemical issue. So we began the purchase, we got in, we fundraised. It was a grassroots act of faith. We leapt in and bought that property. It was bold, but it worked. Over the next decade, with over $2.4 million in member-raised funds, we have transferred that land from a degraded desert. And I think hopefully you've had a chance to look at the before and afters in our submission that actually show what that property has achieved. We turned it into one of the most important private wetland restoration sites in Victoria. It provides a huge refuge to over 1,300 native species, including endangered birds and frogs. It's recognised internationally. The work done has a national significance at that site. But as important as the site was the model that site was designed and meant to project. We were replicating a conservation model successfully employed by other organisations like ours elsewhere in the world, especially in North America, where conservation groups acquire and restore degraded wetlands and then they sell the conservation interests in that land while retaining oversight and stewardship. This creates a self-sustaining revolving fund to buy, restore and protect more wetlands. It's pragmatic, it's innovative, but it's working. Ducks Unlimited has been our partner in guiding us through part of this process, and to give you an example, that model has so far in North America been used successfully to fund, conserve and restore more than 15 million acres of land. privately purchased and rehabilitated. In the last 12 months alone, that model has funded over $1 million, 1 million acres of wetland being purchased and rehabilitated. They work in partnership with landowners, state governments and even the US military to do that work. It's working elsewhere, but it's not working for us. And that's all because we had the same setup. We had the Heart's perpetual engine of conservation set up. We had arrangements with Vic Roads. We had conservation offsets and value input into that property, but then came PFAS, and that has derailed it. In 2016, the contamination of the RAF East Sale base was a known hotspot, but it was confirmed that their only source of outflow of stormwater from that property is directly onto ours. So they have their main eastern main drain, which flows directly into the Heart Morass. It discharges only onto our property, and the Heart Morass is a terminal wetland, which means the water that flows onto our property stays on our property, except in times of flood or overflow. So the water flows on, the water evaporates, but the PFAS does not. So it doesn't break down, it accumulates in the sediment and the base of our wetland. And with that announcement back in 2016, all of our plans for that property have basically, all been put on a standstill. We're now at a loss. We can't sell it. It's commercially worthless. There's no market value. Our offsets have finished and not been renewed. Vic Roads and others have refused to take up environmental offsets in a property that has a known contamination status. The revenue that was previously there, even to get people to voluntarily come in and remove eel and carp and those sorts of activities that we were taking, has also gone. That has recently, since the writing of the submission, come back to a limited value. They can come in and take it, but they're limited to how they use it and where they take it from, which means they're still pretty resistant to help us with those pest control programs that they have done in the past. The public access, which is the lifeblood of our site, is the only thing that's sustained the site so far through access agreements, has declined. Our members are still proud of that site, but they're wary and they're scared. I'll try and jump on. The human impact has been that volunteer basis that we were relying on has heavily withdrawn, and again, it's hard because we lack education to tell people what is the actual risks when they come on and help us on that property. It's a difficult situation. So we have the growing burden of uncertainty with our volunteers. Our programs are largely at a standstill. We don't want to walk away from that property. We're committed to it. We don't also want to have to end up spending millions of dollars on lawyers that we could much better put to use by conserving vital pieces of environment. So,
Mr. Cooke, I'm going to have to
yeah.
there. The questions that we will ask, you can provide answers using that information
Yep.
as well, and you can also put that on notice. It's just that we are running over time. It's not anyone's fault. It's just how we've started the morning. So I'm going to go straight to questions, if that's okay, and I'll go to Senator Davey.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Mr Amos. You've clearly done an awful lot of work in your own time with the FOIs and getting this information from water utilities around the country. We heard this morning about the differences in treatment from Fair Work Victoria compared to Commonwealth. When you're talking to all the water utilities around the country, is there a different approach? And you mentioned that Western Australia wouldn't provide any information. Is the different approaches between the states notable and marked? Do you think we need more consistency across the state borders to both notification, the monitoring and treatment of PFAS contamination?
Well, there are differences between the states. The major one would be Queensland and New South Wales, where the local councils are responsible for the drinking water, whereas Victoria, Tasmania and Northern Territory, WA and South Australia, it's water authorities, I guess. A lot of the councils haven't had the resources to properly, adequately do the monitoring. and the New South Wales government have kicked in the last few months. So there's been a big rollout of testing amongst a lot of communities in New South Wales, where they found high levels at places like Warrialda, which is up in the north of the state, and also Narrabri is another one to worry about. And we all know about the Blue Mountain scenario. Generally, yeah, so that's the main difference between the water authorities, I guess. Water authorities in Victoria have been testing since, it's a bit ad hoc. Some authorities started earlier than others, and South Australia Water only started testing for PFAS in their drinking water last year. And they didn't find any in the major reservoirs, but I think the smaller towns where this issue mainly comes up still haven't been tested at all. Tasmania came up clear, and Victoria, it's sporadic detections. It seems to be, the higher levels seem to have appeared in Queensland, with New South Wales the next rung down, and then Victoria, I guess, is the way that I'm looking at it at the moment.
And I know some of the, being from New South Wales, I know some of the spikes and areas of concern in New South Wales are now appearing in places like you mentioned, Warrialda, that aren't sort of naturally linked to defence or firefighting. So there's a bit of more head scratching with why are those places spiking. Are you identifying any patterns in your research?
Fire stations, airports. I did try to analyse it, but I'd have to get back to you on that. It seems to be a wide variation. The Blue Mountains, for instance, was firefighting on a truck accident. So that's another incident. I think there's a lot of firefighting foam being used across the landscape over the years, but no one's really documented what the pollution is from those events. So that would be something most useful. Yeah, that's how.
Can I add to that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in regards when they were doing the drinking water standards just recently, when you go down the rabbit hole into all the investigations, a lot of water corps, if they weren't connected or near a defence-based Commonwealth, what was known, it was assumed there was low risk, not you did the testing to ensure there wasn't. And see, this is where that sort of stuff has fallen through the gaps. And I mean, if you actually spoke with EPA, there's a lot of illegal dumping. And so who's to say, and we do know that down in Gippsland area, we had the National Safety Council, and, you know, that disbanded. It was all sorts of problems. It was stockpiles. And unfortunately, I'm going to say this anecdotally, but it was in one of the departments, and this is where you have irresponsible management. It said, just go and put those drums up throw those drums up in the creek, go up the hills. We don't know, Dargo Way or whatever. So there's huge storage of AFFF foam that has been dumped in the system. So yeah, there's a lot of assumptions out there, and you can't run on assumptions.
Yeah.
Sorry, Senators, if I could just add one little bit to that as well. We know in our wetlands and through our work with international partners as well, a little bit the same as a previous witness was referring to, you can detect PFAS in the blood. Testing PFAS in groundwater or even surface water is kind of like testing the blood. We know in our wetland the water flows in and evaporates, and as I said, the PFAS stays in the muddy sediment on the bottom of that wetland. So when more water comes in, you can test that fresh water that's flowed in and gone, oh sweet, no PFAS, but it's still there in that muddy sediment. Now places like the Murray River, we would suggest that muddy sediment is being picked up out of contaminated waters during times of flood, carried downstream and deposited. And then, yeah, sure enough, they're coming along and testing the water there and go, wow, where'd this PFAS come from? Yeah. Well, it was carried down in the mud, in the organs of the land that absorbed it in the first place. So testing the blood's great, testing the groundwater's great, but also, you know, it deposits in other places.
And that's what's happened in Gippsland and Latrobe River. No record of testing of the sediment. We've got heavy industry. EPA have admitted that.
And I also should point out that most of the testing done by the water authorities is in untreated water.
Yeah.
So the next stage is that each of the water authorities will have water treatment plants which will reduce the PFAS loads depending on what type of water treatment is being employed in that particular and the traditional form of water treatment plants won't get rid of PFAS. You really need to upgrade, into much better water treatment systems to, get rid of it. And that's what's happened in the Blue Mountains in the last few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is obviously some data, but again, the data sharing is obviously lacking. East Sale they've shared with us that they've got a program to pick up their contaminated soil and essentially pasteurise it. They're burning it, destroying every single piece of organic matter in that soil. Not going to work for our land on the scale or where we need to use it, but they know the PFAS is in the soil. We've got to pick the soil up and burn the soil to get rid of the PFAS. And yet, as I said, they're then ignoring it in other places. So we test the water, and if the water's okay, we say there's no PFAS. It's in the soil.
Yeah. Thank you. And Mr. Cooke, while I've got you, I note, I looked up your website. You still allow access to heart morass and sell keys in return for a donation to the Environmental Task Force, which, by my calculations, the money you earn from that would go nowhere near to what
Roughly
it
maintains
costs.
the track. That's it. Yeah.
But you have got on your website that there is important information on PFAS contamination. Have you had a decline in people applying to come and access the site?
So we have. We're obviously very lucky that we've got that volunteer. So our people that buy the keys and go down and visit the site every year aren't only driven by what they harvest, but we've certainly seen a decline. We've got quite a few that have gone from accessing the site 4 or 5 times a year to now they might only access it once. So they still do buy a key and they go and camp and they do that. But we have seen definite reduction in people wanting to access the site. And one of the other things I didn't get to mentioning is we actually have we had a really solid educational program. We had a bug blitz program that was taking primary school aged kids out and showing them what you find in the water and exactly how important a wetland is. Well, we had a big push back against that, and that's now wound back significantly because we had both parents saying they didn't want their kids in the heart morass because there's PFAS there, and then eventually obviously schools responding to that by saying, well, yeah, we're not going to run excursions there anymore. So certainly from that side of things, the education and we would say getting kids into the wetland is the best possible thing you can do. We were putting a lot of effort into that, and that certainly has scaled right back. Again, through fear, not even through, there's no material around to properly educate.
And I think that we keep hearing, because there is this sort of, everyone, at the moment, everyone's talking about PFAS and there is a lot of concern in the community. But there's not a lot of informed information coming out to communities. You know, would a day trip to a wetland site, what risk does that have? So I think, we need to get better at.
Absolutely. Yep. Just having a nice something to show them, because we can go and try and pull it off websites and out of scientific papers and that sort of thing, but that's, as a parent sitting at home having a permission slip for your kid to go to somewhere and you just recognise, hang on a minute, heart morass, PFAS, I don't want them going there. There's no nice little thing that goes, hey, they're going to be there, but they're not going to be in the water, or they're not going to be eating the mud, and or maybe kids will eat a little bit of the mud, but they're not going to eat a lot of the mud. Just a nice educational thing that actually gives some reassurance to people would be amazing, but it just doesn't exist at the moment.
Can I just add quickly, there's another chemical that it's a breakdown product of PFAS. It's called TFA, trifluoroacetic acid. Now it's been detected right across Europe and the United States. It's they're seeing it in high levels in agricultural areas. Now, as far as I can tell, there's not one authority in the country in Australia that's testing for it. It's going to make PFAS seem, I won't say minor, but this other chemical is out there. I talked to an analytical chemist last year. There's not one lab in the country in Australia that can actually test for it. Now, this stuff's out there in the environment, but we haven't got any means of testing its levels. It'll also be in drinking water as well. So if you're looking at PFAS, yeah, just keep that one in mind. It's called TFA, and that'll be the next big one.
Thank you. Senator Pratt, do you have any questions? And we are... No questions?
I don't think so. I've not seen anything.
Okay. Well, I have a number of questions, so I'll try and be really quick. I mean, there's so many questions. So, Ms. Anton, if I could ask you, what authority do Food Standard Australia New Zealand have to override state food safety laws?
That's the interesting one, because when they did the response to my submission, they sort of ignore the fact that the law is the law. So when a landowner is supposed to be selling food, you know, for human consumption, they have to abide by the Act. Now, when you have Frisance do guidelines and triggers and say, well, this is all okay, you can on-sell, it's still guidelines. It's still not assessed on anything that's real. It's assumptions, it's means, averages, estimates and that. So where they've got the Food Ministers Forum, so in that forum, that's where that interaction comes place. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, they cannot overrule the law. So where I say the landowner has that legal burden, when they get into a court of law, it's not going to, their authority is not going to stop a third party suing a landowner. It can't. And so that's it. If you knowingly on-sold your contaminated foodstuff to someone and they weren't happy about it, they could take you to court and that, and you bear all the cost burdens and the legal liability. That won't override that at all. So there's this huge gap. So where it's a generalisation and say we discuss this, we work on this, we provide the standards, they cannot actually operate in the court of law. So what they need to do then, go say, well, we'll give indemnity to those landowners, if those food producers. If they're going to say that it's safe for them to sell food when the State Act says you must not knowingly sell contaminated food into the market, we'll give them indemnity. And then the other thing is, then where's the human rights and our consumer rights? We've got a right to be informed. So that doesn't exist as well. So, you know, Frisance need to consider the bigger picture, the entirety of it. It's just a bunch of people in Melbourne with, you know, not in the real world. And, you know, this is what we're dealing with. Yeah.
So do you think Frisance is using up-to-date scientific knowledge?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. Through all of their reports, you know, and I've challenged them on what are you using. It's all about in the Australian context. So they've spent a lot of time, you know, discrediting other papers, yet we know from our international contemporaries what's going on over there. So, you know, you've got to look at that. So, you know, we're not a different subspecies here that can cope with it. It's all the same in one all around the world. So that's a very easy one to prove that they're not.
Yes, we're very far behind in this country, that's for sure, when it comes to PFAS particularly. So how is irrigating farmland with PFAS contaminated water managed in Victoria?
It's not. So what happens, I'll give an example of ESO. So what they've done is, you know, on their land, they've got high contamination rates, and they'll say, but when you go further away, all the way down to 90 Mile Beach and down there, but it's lower rates down there. No, it's not that it's lower rates down there. You should be pretty concerned. It's down there. How long has it been down there? And so they actually used the drinking water as a guideline. You know, so, okay, if there's no stock in domestic levels, that was in 2017. Nothing's changed till now. So what I do know, I presented that to an Oki farmer. So his contamination now of his irrigation bore, and he put it to defence. They went to Queensland EPA and they said, apply recreational level. Now, you don't raise livestock for recreation. You raise it to eat, and it just shows this discrepancy. It's just a joke. So that's why I say on the day, who you've got, they choose to do whatever they want. So part of this, the defence recommendations for that 2024, they're looking at that, but you've got to have a whole lot of other people involved. You've got our chief vet in 2017 telling farmers you cannot sell. And what right has he got to do that based on an estimate? No risk profiles.
Thank you.
Can I just add, is that okay? In 2018, there was a major study published in Melbourne looking at contamination at Werribee South, where most of our vegetable crops are grown in Victoria, and they found quite high levels of PFAS in the groundwater, but what they thought it was, the source of it was coming from the wastewater treatment plant, recycled water. So that was being sprayed on crops, lettuces and all the like, and I don't know if there's been any follow-up since 2018, but our veggie crops are impacted.
Yeah, so you're still looking at just the 3 compounds, whereas Frazans will say, oh, we test for 30, but you still only apply the 3 compounds. No matter how you test, you're not applying them as your trigger levels.
Thank you. I do have a number of other questions for you, but I'll have to put those on notice. Because we are running out of time. We're into the tea break and we are running 15 minutes behind. But I do want to ask one question of you all before we end this session. Mr. Amos, you are a very small network of people that have produced the Australian PFAS chemicals map, which has had 41,000 active users in 2024. I note that this is incredible effort from volunteers. Are you aware of any effort to effectively map the location and extent of PFAS contamination across the country by any government agencies?
No. That might be done on a small regional level, the maps used by various state authorities are pretty weak. And you've got to go back in time. I've also looked after a pesticide map and a drinking water map, and what became evident 10 or 15 years ago, but there's no federal government agency that monitors biocide use across Australia. So one of the reasons we put out the PFAS map, there's 40,000 visits in last month actually, was that there's no government agency which is doing it. So it's left to a couple of people, when they get the spare time to actually stick this stuff online, because there's no agency actually doing it. So we're shooting in the dark, basically. And you've got to ask yourself, why hasn't the federal government got a biocide monitoring use? Even in terms of pesticides, in the US, they've got a rigorous system in place. Australia, nothing. And it's really hard to get the information, and it takes a lot of time. And how do you get a picture of what's going on, what's being used where, when there's no agency actually responsible for that?
So I assume that would be one of your recommendations to this committee?
Yeah, and it'll save us doing it then.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Cooke and Mr. Howard, have any tests been undertaken on wildlife in the Hart morass to see how much it's been affected by bioaccumulating of PFAS?
Yes, so it has. There has been testing, but I think Gary can probably talk to it. 10 birds.
10 birds from one of the defence contractors were taken and sampled, and Arthur Roller Institute took, I think, 15 or 20 further down in the morass for sampling as well, but that's only sampling's been.
What year was that? Is that at the start in about 2017?
Yep.
This is about, where's the update?
Yeah.
And what was any response from that testing?
Very little, nothing conclusive. That's the thing. The big thing with ducks, they got wings, and within 20 seconds they can be in a wetland across the other side of the river, which is not as impacted as us. So it's inconclusive what was found.
It's done at such a tiny scale that they went. We can't tell anything. They found elevated levels, but they couldn't then put that back. Well, where did that come from, or in how many of the ducks? So, yeah, no testing at anywhere near a big enough scale to actually try and track those things.
Yeah.
I can provide EPA's updated the PFAS levels in in aquatic life and all that. 2019, then it goes 2021. So we're running blind.
Well, whatever you can provide to this committee will be taken as part of the evidence, also part of us deciding what recommendations we put forward, and part of the report going forward, so that the government can look at the report, look at the recommendations and make decisions accordingly.
Can I just say one thing? Being it's a state-based and working with industry that have been the polluter, it's the polluter and the victim. We've got to stop this delineation of state and federal because it's not helping. There's no continuity.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your evidence and appearing today. If you have been asked to provide any material on notice, please send it through to the Secretariat by Monday, 23rd of June 2025. Thank you very much. And we'll take a short break. What's that?